I'm going to do a quick demonstration of stranded color work, which is a knitting method where you're holding 2 or more strands of yarn across the row, alternating colors based on a pattern. I've done a few rows with my main color here, or my background color, and I'm going to tie on my contrast color by crossing under the main color and then tying it in half a knot, trapping the main color there, pull it snug and push it up. Now I'm going to hold one color in each hand, which is the most common way to do this, and I'm going to hold the main color or background color in my right hand and the contrast color or pattern color in my left hand. This is somewhat counterintuitive because there's more stitches in the background color and I do knit a little slower with the yarn in my right hand, but you'll find, especially if you do some testing, that your pattern will pop more if you hold things like this. So I'm starting with 2 edge stitches in my main color, knitting 2. Now I'm into a 4-stitch repeat. And the 4-stitch repeat is knitting 2 with my main color and knitting 1 with my contrast color. And before I knit that one, because I've got this long float, I have done 4 stitches without attaching this. I'm just going to stretch these out a little bit to make sure that my float in the back doesn't pull the knitted fabric and bunch it up and take away the stretchiness. I have 1 more stitch in my main color, and this is my 4-stitch repeat. Those are my edge stitches. So I'm going to start this again. 2 stitches with my main color, 1 stitch contrast, kind of stretching these out of it, pulling them back. I use my thumb for that. And then 1 more stitch with my main color, and repeat. 2 stitches main color, spread them out a bit, 1 stitch contrast color. Now at the very end of my row, I'm going to have 2 stitches remaining. Actually, let me take that back. I have 1 stitch main color, that's part of my repeat, then I have 1 edge stitch remaining. So I will end up just knitting that very last one here. So you can see I have 3 repeats here, 2 edge stitches on this side, 1 edge stitch on the other. Now for my following row, I again am going to have the contrast color in my left hand, main color or background color in my right hand. I'm going to purl my first stitch with my main color, and now I need to do 3 stitches with my contrast color. And this is close enough that I can just start working with it, but because these are detached, it's useful to pass this contrast color around your main color. This is a technique that's also used in intarsia, so that they are connected here so you don't get a gap. Then I'm ready for my 3 stitches of my contrast color. 1, 2, 3, and I'm purling since this is a wrong side row. And then I'm going to leave that yarn, make sure it's in the front, and I'm going to knit 1 stitch with my background color. And again, I tried to make sure I leave my float a little loose here. The stitches on the needle don't have to be loose, but the floats do. So you're going to practice a bit to find that balance. So 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to purl this, making sure that I leave a little extra room for the float. 3 contrast, 1 main, stretching those out a bit. And at the very end, I have 2 more main color stitches, so I can just drop this if it's in my way, because I'm done with it. Now, for demonstration purpose, I'm using a very round yarn. This is superwash wool, so it's not the ideal yarn for stranded colorwork because it doesn't have a bit of grabbiness. It's kind of slick and smooth, but it does show up pretty well in the video. Generally for stranded colorwork, the traditions are having a yarn that has a bit more tooth to it, so like a Shetland wool or a Icelandic Lopi wool, and those will hold their shape a little bit better and fill in the stitches. When you wash them, they'll kind of poof up and bloom. Row 3 in my pattern, I'm going to start with 4 stitches of my main or background color. Row 3 is actually the same that row 1 was. It's a pretty simple little cross pattern here. 1 stitch contrast, and then 3 stitches of my main color. 1 that ends the first repeat, 2 that start the next repeat. 1 stitch contrast, and then my main. 4, 3. So really these 2 rows are very similar. They just shift which one is dominant, which is getting 3 stitches and which is getting 1. There we go. And as always happens, we want to do another row or 2 just so we'll be able to see that, so that the background can frame the work. Stranded colorwork is most often done with 2 colors per row. It can be done with 3, in which case you would figure out where you want that 3rd strand to be in which hand. It'll depend a bit on if the 3rd strand is joining the background or if it's another pattern row. It is possible to hold 2 colors in the same hand, but most often people do what I'm demonstrating here with 1 color in each. So that was just a plain purl row so that you can see this little cross pattern that we've created.